Hello? Hello? Okay, so it seems like we are live. I'm going to wait for a few minutes and then start answering questions. I already have one, two, three, four, five of them, but I'm going to wait for a few minutes just so that we have at least a few viewers. Currently, it's at 0. Okay, so we have more than one viewer. Thank you for joining the office hours today, and I'm sorry for announcing it this late, as in the last couple of weeks. Simply, I don't know when I'll be actually able to do this on Friday. Last week I couldn't do it. This week I can actually do it, although it's spring break. So next week we will do it normally. So for next week I've scheduled it for 4 o'clock, and I'm going to create a link in Hangouts on Air as soon as we are done with this one. I didn't want people to be confused about which link to use. So I'm going to go now first through the, I guess, 5 or 6 questions that we already have in the list. The first one is, can you please confirm the syllabus for midterm 2? Is it up to including cache coherence? Will it be similar to midterm 1 in terms of questions and the time? The answer is yes. So basically, the course really has 3 parts. The first part is about the core itself, and then we start the second part, which is on, so that was covered on the midterm 1. The second part is about the basically caches and so on, and then the third part is really about parallelism and all the other things. So basically, let me just kind of go to the, just so that I don't say anything wrong. I'll go to the Udacity site for to name the lesson properly. Hi, and welcome to my online course on computer architecture to the confection of Windows and CS. So effectively, the midterm, the first midterm was everything up to and including the VLIW. So the second midterm will cover the material that starts with a cache review lesson and then goes into the virtual memory advanced caches and so on. And the last topic that will be covered on the midterm will actually be just the fault tolerance lesson. The final will then cover mostly the multiprocessing and onwards, including cache coherence and so on. And of course, the final will also cover to a lesser extent the whole class. So it's a comprehensive final exam, but about something like maybe, at least 60% of it will basically be the third part of the class. So actually the midterm 2 will not be including the cache coherence. Basically, it stops with the VLAW stuff. I'm sorry. Let me go back there. So it stops with the fault tolerance lesson, actually. The reason why the schedule actually has stuff beyond the fault tolerance is simply because I don't believe in kind of quizzing students on material that they've just covered. So basically, the plan was for you to actually have seen everything that will be on midterm 2 at least sometime before the midterm. So I hope that answers your question. So again, basically the multiprocessing is actually not going to be on midterm 2. Can you provide answers for project 2? At least what value we should be getting? Yes, I mean the plan is to grade that, but I will provide what was the kind of expected answers for project 2. One of the issues with midterm 1 is that we have to scroll horizontally to see the complete question. Can it be fixed for this midterm? I'll try to. The problem is that that sort of thing has to do with pretty much how T-square format things, and I don't get much control over that. So I'll try to make sure that there are no like huge tables or anything like that, because apparently that had some browsers had problems with that. One of the fixes for that some students found was actually to if the browser has a zoom kind of a slider to actually just kind of reduce the page so that you can see the whole thing. But I agree it's annoying, so I'll try to avoid having something like that. But sometimes what I test is not what you actually end up seeing. So I'll do my best, but I can't really promise not to have anything like that. But we will. I hope it doesn't happen. This question is for compulsory misses. Why is a write miss counted as if it was never in the cache? I'm not sure I follow the question. So essentially, the compulsory miss basically should be that the block was never in the cache. So I'm not really sure why would a write miss be counted as if it was never in the cache. So I never said that. For project 2, is it okay to fill in capacity and conflict misses fields even if I'm working alone? Just making sure that I don't lose points for doing that extra work. Well, the problem is that if you put it in, then it will be graded. So essentially, if your classification of conflict and capacity misses is incorrect and you were working alone, if you do enter it, then we'll have to grade it, and if it's not correct, then you might lose points because you might lose points because basically you provided an incorrect answer for that. So it's kind of safer for you not to do it if you don't have to, but you can. You will not lose points for doing it. You might lose points for putting an incorrect answer there. When can we expect grades for project 2, and also when can we expect to see the midterm link on ProctorU? I was planning to do that on Monday when the kind of non-break part of the campus activity starts, because basically there is almost nothing going on at the campus at this time. So getting anybody to do anything would be a little bit harder, especially teaching-wise. For the grades for project 2, the submission period has actually just ended. Remember that there is a 3-day grace period, so we've started looking into grading of the project 2, but we expect it's going to be at least a few days more. So I kind of hope to have it by the end of the week, but I can't really. It really depends basically on how many problems. If everybody does everything correctly, then it's only a matter of days. But if there is a lot of kind of puzzling out what did students do and so on, then it might take longer. So I really hope it's going to happen soon, but as in maybe by Wednesday or Thursday. But let's say by next weekend, I really, I'm 90% certain by next weekend we will have project 2 graded. The link for the midterm, I expect it to appear pretty much, I'll send in the required information for starting the scheduling process, and then I hope that ProctorU will be able to kind of create that and open it by, let's say, mid next week. But again, that's something that I have little control over. My plan is to kind of send things in on Monday, and then kind of it's their delay basically until you can actually see it. So for project 2, read misses plus write misses are compulsory misses and non-compulsory misses. So I'm sorry if I don't follow. I would really let me check what exactly the project 2 says, because I just finished writing up the project 3, so I just need to make sure that again I don't say something that is actually project 3 related and not project 2. Yeah, so my reading of the question is that basically read misses and write misses need to be classified into compulsory misses and non-compulsory misses. And again, I'm not sure I follow the question. So basically, yes, the number of read misses and write misses needs to be essentially equal to the number of compulsory and non-compulsory misses if you're classifying both read and write misses together. You could have classified read misses as basically compulsory read misses and non-compulsory read misses, and then write misses as compulsory and non-compulsory misses. But I'm again not sure what the question is. Oh, okay. So apparently there is a Piazza post. So I'll check that later. Will the format, the screen layout, etc., be the same for midterm 2? Can I print out a copy of the exam while taking it? I think it would be okay to print out a copy of the exam. I mean, it's just that you're kind of wasting time on printing it and then doing it on paper and then having to enter the answers. But I'll try to make sure that proctors treat that as allowed activity. So yes, you can print out the exam and then take it. And then I guess you still have to enter your answers in the form. So basically, what you print out is only for kind of your own purposes. Can I share with the class the technical description reasoning I gave privately to TAs on Piazza about how and why the random implementation has a bug? It's line by line for why. Yes, we are aware that the random implementation actually doesn't do really anything. So remember when the instructions for the project basically told you that you need to essentially create a new policy. The reason why it mentioned the LRU and the random is because by kind of searching for those two policies being mentioned, you can actually find where in the code changes need to be made, because there are several changes that have to do with just kind of enabling the config file for basically the config file needs to now have a MRU policy, and then you have to actually change in several places the code in order to actually get that from the config file and treat it as one of the allowed policies and so on. But the actual code for replacement in the simulator basically doesn't really have a random policy. Pretty much the code that is there that kind of mentions random policy actually never gets really called. So the code was really only implementing the LRU policy, and it's okay to explain why, but now that the project is over, I guess you can just do it. There are some pending items from last office hours. Are they already addressed? Some of them not. So one of the things I promised to do, and I haven't had a chance to do yet, is essentially to explain some things from midterm one. But I was expecting that somebody will tell me actually like what are the parts that basically there was feedback provided for all your answers in midterm one. And in the previous office hours, there was a discussion about the feedback not being adequate, and I haven't really seen anything that is like, kind of which part of the feedback wasn't clear, because we thought that we are actually providing quite a bit of feedback in terms of how to do the correct how to get the correct answers. The only questions that we haven't provided any feedback for are the first three questions, but I mean, anybody who has trouble figuring that out, now that you do have access to the videos and so on, I mean, if you really need somebody to explain basically Amdahl's law again, or iron law questions to you, then it's probably a problem anyway. Okay, so we ran out of questions. So the plan for midterm 2 is actually to to avoid some confusion, because now that I have no questions, let me point out the problem that we weren't aware of. I mean, I didn't expect it, but it's happening. Is that as I told you, the tests and quizzes module auto grades everything, and basically the way it auto grades things is that we provided some answers to the forms, because it wants to auto grade things. And what's really happening is that the scores you see over there are basically the auto-graded scores. So pretty much, for example, one of the problems with those scores is that they're treating all of the boxes with equal weight and so on. So some of the, for example, branch prediction items are kind of laughably easy. Like, for example, there are 10 boxes that essentially amount to what the one-bit predictor would do. And as you know, a one-bit predictor really should be just predicting whatever was the last outcome. So really, there are 10 boxes that are pretty much trivial to fill out, and there are relatively few points actually allocated for that, because the rest of the question is asking you a bunch of things about the 2-bit predictor and history-based predictors and so on. But as far as t-squares autograder is concerned, all of these boxes are just going to be worth some fraction of the point. So pretty much the scores you see for those questions that are actually part of the grading in the kind of the midterm 1 assignment, the scores you see in the tests and quizzes module are basically irrelevant, because they have not been really generated by our grading. They have been generated by pretty much the autograder. To avoid that, what we'll do is for midterm 2, we will just not release any scores from the test and quizzes module. So basically, the only feedback you will get is the feedback through the kind of assignment. So pretty much we will kind of get the data from the test and quizzes module that you submit, and then we will just kind of enter the feedback, and then you will get the text feedback, and you will be able to see the questions and your own answers, but there will no longer be any feedback in tests and quizzes, because it looks like it's confusing students. So just to kind of clarify that point, and to kind of, we just didn't expect that students will be confused by this, because it was supposed to be that the feedback we give you and the scores we kind of provide with those feedback are kind of the relevant ones, and the test and quizzes scores can largely be ignored, but some students were concerned about the disagreement between the test and quizzes and the kind of midterm 1 assignment basically feedback. So to avoid that, there will be no feedback for future test and quizzes. Just I mean, there will be feedback, but it's solely going to go through kind of the when we grade things, we will basically paste that feedback into the test 2 and then the final exam assignment. And the test and quizzes module will only provide pretty much your answers, so that you can see what the feedback is about. If you forget what you answered, then what the question was. I was trying to get an answer for project one so that I can assess why I missed 20 bits in calculations. Yeah, okay, so we do have some. Yeah, I forgot actually that I also promised to do that. So I'll definitely try to do that. Probably let me see. Tomorrow I might be able to do it, but definitely on Monday I'll look into basically what exactly was the reasoning behind the 20 bits and that led to, let's say, 35 bits instead of 64. Can you please consider providing extra credit for students who got misclassification correctly working alone on project one? I cannot do that because the assignment was pretty clear about what I'm asking you to do, and the reason why I cannot do this is because it effectively discourages students from working together. So basically, when you work together, the instructions for the assignment are different than when you work alone. And if there was extra credit for working alone and yet doing the work of the kind of work together students, that would motivate students to kind of not work together, which is not our intent. So basically, the additional work that you have to do while working together is intended to make sure that students who work together basically do have more work, so that it's not like easier for those two students than for the students working alone. But if students working alone go above and beyond what was expected of them, I cannot really give them extra credit because the students working in pairs did not get the opportunity to earn extra credit. So pretty much, if I provide an opportunity for extra credit, then I'll provide it to all the students, not just to those who chose to do things alone. I mean, just to kind of elaborate a little bit on that point, because again, there are no questions. I strongly believe that if one student gets an opportunity to do something, then all of the students should get an opportunity to do that, which also means that I will not be giving, kind of special consideration to students for things that are, under their control. Let's say, so if somebody is sick, for example, for a prolonged period of time, and I get a doctor's note, I might give them extra time to finish an assignment or something like that. But if one student gets an extra 3 days for free to do an assignment, then all of you will get it. Same thing with extra credit. If one student gets an opportunity to earn extra credit, then all of you will get an opportunity to earn extra credit. I'm not going to basically those that chose one path through the class get an opportunity while the others don't. The only exception to that is if there is actually a pretty clear indication of there will be extra credit for this ahead of time. So I'm not going to now revise basically what the project one scores will look like, because students who work together were expecting to get the same possible maximum score as everybody else. If we really blew it on the first midterm, can anyone opt to take advantage of the substitute the final for the first midterm and final offer, which was created to make up for Proctor U issues? That was not created. I mean, no student actually. I mean, I'm not aware of any student. I might be mistaken. I might have done something like this. The substitute the final for the first midterm and the final. The students who actually had I mean, there were 4 students basically who, because of the scheduling mistake at Proctor U, were offered an opportunity to take a new midterm exam, basically. But 3 of those students never really saw the exam. And the 4th one began the exam and was cut off 15 minutes into the exam. Primarily, I mean, the reason for this was basically that the midterm was supposed to end fully, like, the quiz just closes, so it cannot be taken by anybody anymore at 6 p.m. Yet Proctor U, for some reason, chose to allow students to register for times that were as close as half an hour to that, and there were 4 students affected by this. 3 of them, actually, by the time they set up their Proctor U session and so on, the exam can no longer be taken anyway, so they never actually even saw the original exam. And one of them had about 20 minutes into the exam, and then the exam just closed on that. So they got an opportunity to just take the midterm exam again. That was the only kind of corrective action that we had to that we had to do. But definitely somebody who has taken a midterm exam, unless there was a really serious reason for them not being able to take it, will not be given an opportunity to make up for it. Again, because if I offer an opportunity for some student, basically, like if a student doesn't like how they did on midterm one, then if I give them an opportunity to redo or take the exam again, then I feel that I should do that for everybody else, which is not feasible really to kind of have everybody retake the midterm one. The only exception to that is basically issues like this, when it's not really the student's fault. Pretty much the student wanted to take the exam, they just never got the opportunity to do that, or the student started taking an exam and then was cut off because of a scheduling mistake. Who do you recommend contacting if we wish to contribute to the SESC project after the class is over? SESC actually has now a new version called eSESC. So I think that the version we are using is actually, technically obsolete. I didn't want to start. I didn't want to base projects on eSESC because it's a relatively recent development. So it's possibly even buggier. Basically, there is less understanding of which bugs are there and so on. For SESC, me and my students are fairly familiar with what the bugs are already. So even though every simulator is basically buggy to some extent. But for this one, we kind of are very familiar with the code. So whatever bugs there are, we kind of know how to survive them. So for eSESC, eventually I'll probably start using eSESC or some other simulator. But that means basically that the code we are looking at now is not really the kind of main thread of the SESC development. If you are interested in contributing to eSESC, then eSESC is actually available on SourceForge. You can just kind of check it out and make regular contributions to it and so on. It's one of those things where basically the kind of the latest and greatest in the research simulator technology is maybe not something you want to use for the class, because it's fairly sophisticated in terms of which there are, for example, a lot of configuration options and power analysis things and so on that would just complicate the learning experience. Basically would be much more complicated, because there are a lot of parameters that I haven't taught you about, because this simulator was not really meant for use in a class. It was meant to write research papers, and actually there are a lot of research papers based on the SESC simulator. So I felt that forcing everybody to learn almost everything about the kind of latest and greatest in what modern processor cores simulation looks like, I felt that that's not really where I wanted this class to go, because there are several more advanced classes at Georgia Tech, for example, that I teach, and this is supposed to be kind of like a introductory, let's say, level graduate class. So it's not introductory class for computer architecture, but it's definitely not like you take this class and now you can actually build a modern processor. It's more like you take this class and now you can understand when somebody explains to you how the modern processor really works and what the pieces and so on. So a lot of how the modern processor works is based on what we are learning, but there are a lot, for example, branch predictors are much more sophisticated than the ones we covered. And then, the multi-core issues and so on, there has been a lot more, research going into that and so on. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to balance what the students actually have to learn in order to understand what's going on versus what the students would need to understand in order to actually contribute to the research body of knowledge in this area. Still no question. So now that I have no questions, let me add one more thing, which is when grading the midterm and some of the projects, I found out that some of the students have been kind of loosely interpreting what's expected in some of the boxes. So basically, most of the boxes the boxes that say explain why clearly expect you to enter an explanation in English language sentences and so on. But the boxes that ask you basically, I mean the boxes that are kind of part of a sentence and clearly a number should go there, you really should put a number there and not put an explanation. Okay, so I've realized that it actually helps us to understand what the student tried to do if there is an explanation. So if you put I mean, you still have to put a number. If you don't put a number there, then it's kind of going to be treated as an incorrect answer. But I've actually allowed now to kind of, I mean, basically the discussion was, should we just treat anything that is not a number as a wrong answer? And my take on that is probably not. It helps to have an explanation. But also, I want people to actually, I mean, students to actually, submit a number they have and then explain how they got it. So the compromise between the two is basically that, in future assignments and tests, if you put a number and then in parentheses you put an explanation for why you have that number, that's okay. Okay, but it has to be a single number followed by an explanation in parentheses. What I don't want to see, and what I'll grade basically as just an incorrect answer, is if you put something like, I mean, some students, for example, did something like, 10 or 11. It's like, no, that's not an answer. You put a 10 or you put an 11 there, because if I give you the opportunity to provide two answers and I pick which one is correct, then everybody else should be allowed basically two choices, right? So when we expect a number, we expect a single number. If you have some doubts about which number it should be, what you can do is, pick the number that you think is the most likely to be the correct answer, and then in parentheses explain why you think that number is the correct answer, and if you're doubtful about whether it's that number, put kind of the other possibilities that you're considering and why you would enter those. But essentially, if a number is expected, then it's not fair to everybody else to let somebody provide basically alternative answers, because that amounts to basically kind of trying the question twice. So just be aware of that. Basically, kind of putting two numbers in a field that was meant to be a single number, kind of like 9 or 10, amounts to basically, just I mean, you could have just left it blank, because I'm not going to kind of pick the best of the two. Again, it's a fairness issue, pretty much. If somebody gets to enter more than one possible answer, then everybody else should be given the opportunity to kind of enter candidate answers, and we select the best one, which we are not willing to do, because you should know what you're. I mean, in real life, basically, you would have to kind of pick an answer that you're gonna use, and sometimes the answer you pick is based on kind of incomplete information and so on. But essentially, the expectation is that if a number is expected, you will put a number there. Okay, so I have still 5 viewers and no questions. How heavily will the first part of the course be represented on midterm 2? The answer is, if there is anything about the first part of the course, it's going to be kind of incidental. So pretty much, for example, the first part of the course includes how you compute speed ups and how you apply Amdahl's law and stuff like that. So of course, those kinds of things might be part of questions on midterm 2. So that there will not be any question that explicitly is basically has no. I mean, basically, there will not be any question that is only based on the part 2 of the course. Pretty much every question will include at least some component of the second part of the course. But keep in mind that we cannot really exclude the material from the first part of the course, because the first part of the course is really how the core works. The second part of the course is basically how the caches and the virtual memory and so on work. And to a large extent, the reason why you have caches is because of the memory being slow and so on. But many of the things related to the cache are actually also a result of how the whole memory subsystem interacts with the core. So, for example, the reason why you want to have miss under miss is basically because you do have a core that can actually, have one instruction in progress, and yet it tries to execute future instructions without waiting so basically doesn't do instructions one at a time and so on. So some know, most of the knowledge actually of the first part of the course might be needed to kind of answer the questions on the midterm, but there won't be a question that is explicitly asking you only things about the first part of the course. I'm not sure if that answered the question. So basically the questions will be about the second part of the course, but you might need knowledge of the material from the first part of the course to successfully answer those things, because the first part and the second part kind of interact with each other a lot in some areas. I have asked a few private questions on Piazza and did not get an answer in time before project 2. What is the best way to get answers for private questions? Can we send email directly to the TA? The answer to the Piazza thing should be basically the way to ask these questions. Is just that if you the problem is basically that if you ask these questions too close to the deadline, keep in mind that we are dealing with a lot of questions at the time. So basically, we will be answering questions kind of in the order that they appear, sometimes in kind of prioritized by, if multiple people ask the same question or something like that. So the best way to get answers on time is to actually ask them on time. If you ask, basically, if you ask questions like the day before something is due, keep in mind that we might actually not get to your question at all, because we are dealing with other questions that basically there are 100 students, and we routinely get more than 100 questions on the last day before the something is due. So pretty much there is almost nothing that can be done in that regard. Pretty much, we just get overloaded if you ask the question too late. If that's a problem, then I'll be happy to institute a policy that basically we will not answer any questions that are asked within 12 hours of the deadline for a project. If students feel that's more fair, because some questions do get answered because we get to them on time, and some questions don't get answered. So pretty much it's kind of a choice between answering some questions and just having a policy that we don't answer any questions that are asked too late. So regardless of which of the choices we want to implement, basically the way to get your questions answered is to begin the project on time, and to ask your questions while we are not dealing with 100 other questions that are kind of the last minute work on projects. So pretty much kind of, if you discover the problems, if you encounter problems with the project like a week before it's due, then your question will probably be the only one that hour, and we can answer it. But if you are trying to do the project within the last couple of hours before it's due, then chances are everybody else will be doing the same, and we just cannot basically spend 2 days before the project is due just sitting in front of Piazza and answering questions. So we only have some amount of time that we can spend on that, and unfortunately that time gets kind of overwhelmed when things are close to the deadline. So again, it's not about really us not reading the question, at all. It's about basically, there's a queue of questions, and we are kind of going through it, but sometimes it just takes time to answer questions. If you're asking them too late, then you might not get the answer before the project is due. Oh, okay. Yeah, then I don't know what happened. I guess I'll have to talk to the TAs then about trying to maybe keep up a little bit better with the Piazza post, because I kind of expect all the questions to be answered within some time. Maybe at most like a couple of days if it's kind of a burst of questions. But yeah, asking a week before the deadline, you should definitely get the answer, like 3 days before the deadline. There were some early disagreements, let's say, about who should be doing what and so on, and we kind of ironed that out. So this, if it happened early enough in the semester, might have been kind of part of what was wrong, but basically in the last, let's say, 2 weeks, we definitely kind of have agreed that pretty much we will all kind of take care of the questions in Piazza, and any questions that are kind of that TAs are unable to handle with, they're supposed to kind of bring them up to me, basically point them out to me, so that I can kind of look at those first instead of trying to deal with the other things like design the exam and stuff like that. So I'm sorry it happened. Basically, I mean, it shouldn't have happened. And I'll talk to the TAs about making sure that if there is a question that, let's say, remains unanswered for several days, that if they don't know how to do it, then they should really kind of point the questions to me, so that I can answer them. Okay, so we are waiting for more questions. Still not questions? Okay, so while waiting for your questions, I've created a Hangout on Air for next week. So it's going to be 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Atlanta time on Friday. The reason for that is that at 5 p.m. I basically have to be in my daughter's school to pick her up. So so it's going to be 3:30 to 4:30, because that is probably better than having to kind of get out 15 minutes before the official end of office hours. I'll try to stay actually slightly longer than 4:30, but essentially I'll probably have to leave around 4:45, 4:50. So I'm going to start at 3:30 and then see if there are questions and so on, and kind of go by that. So we're looking at basically next week having the office hours a little bit earlier. The reason why I could do today this late, and I know that many of you prefer this to be as late in the day as possible, is because it's spring break. I don't have to be on campus, so essentially I stayed home, and thus I can actually pretty much there is no commute, so I can actually do this from 4:30 to 5:30. Normally this would be kind of the commute time back. And remember that we will have our midterm soon. So pretty much I do hope that next office hours I will have a lot of questions about clarifying the class material and answering all sorts of questions about the midterm and so on. And also I have released the project 3. So I hope to by Monday or Tuesday actually put like the proper forms for filling out so that students can start submitting if they already have done project 3, which it's probably unlikely, but I hope somebody at least has started the project. So if there are any questions about project 3, I'll be happy to answer them, but I'll try to prioritize things so that I first answer the kind of midterm related questions, then the project related questions, because we have slightly more time for we have more time for the project than for the midterm at this point. Okay, so we have 13 more minutes and still no question. Okay, so we have 10 more minutes and still no questions. I'm still waiting for questions here. Okay, so we have 7 more minutes. So because I don't really like just kind of staring at a blank screen, are you going to ask any questions, or should I just? I guess let me then tell you a little bit about what my research is about, because students sometimes want to know what their professors are kind of up to. So my work is on computer architecture, of course, but my primary interest is in kind of the let's say quality aspects of it. So basically, it's about reliability, security, how do you debug programs on modern computers, and so on. So my 2 projects that I'm now the most heavily involved in are the what you would call performance debugging. Essentially, if your program on a multi-core processor or a many-core processor is not as fast as you expect it to be, given that it has 8 or 16 cores to run on, and it will have more in the future. The question is basically, how do you tell what the problem is? So essentially, you write a parallel program, you have 32 threads, it runs on a 32-core processor. How do you know what the real problem is? And a kind of brief glimpse into issues like that you can see in project 3, where basically the cache misclassification, for example, that you will be trying to do is kind of like a one of the basic things that can be done in that regard. So essentially, if your computer actually, if your processor is able to, for example, classify misses, which most modern processors are not really capable of, then you would essentially get a hint. For example, when you have too many cache misses, you would know why they're happening. So if you have a lot of cache misses, it might be that they're happening because simply, we are using too much data, and a lot of them are compulsory misses. Pretty much the program is kind of going through, kind of reading in a lot of data from memory and just, using it once, kind of like a streaming thing. Most programs don't do that, though. So usually compulsory misses are a relatively tiny fraction of all of the misses that the processor suffers. However, the conflict misses, the capacity misses, and the coherence misses, it turns out that any one of these 3 categories can be a problem for your overall performance. So basically, if you have a single core, basically a single threaded program, then it's usually the conflict or capacity misses that are a performance problem. And unfortunately, even in that sort of scenario, the fixes, so basically, if your program is slow because of conflict misses, essentially the solutions for something like that would be different than the solutions for, basically, you would change the program in different ways than if you had capacity misses. So if you have capacity misses, basically the only real solution is to try to kind of change your program so that it uses less of your data at any given time. So for example, if you were trying to do something like kind of the simplest things that you can think of are, for example, you have a large matrix that you need to do something like invert, or kind of compute the inverse of a matrix. And there are well-known techniques that are basically, instead of operating on the whole matrix at once, you essentially break the matrix into blocks. Basically, it's kind of like squarish parts of the matrix that are smaller than your cache size, and then you kind of operate on those. So the idea is that basically at any given time you're using kind of heavily operating on data that is basically fitting in your caches. So that's kind of for fixing the capacity problem. Pretty much you have to really use an appropriate algorithm. It's very hard to reduce a capacity problem by kind of making quick changes. If you have conflict misses, however, and not a capacity miss, that means that your program does fit in the cache. It's just that somehow the data that you are using together, basically, within like a small interval of time, essentially ends up mapping to the same set. So this, for example, can happen if you have something like a, I don't know, direct map cache, for example, where you're maybe copying just one array into another place in memory, and the source and the destination happen to be such that the first block of the first array of the source array needs to go to the first block of the destination array, and the arrays are perfectly aligned to the cache size. So basically, the source block basically begins at a kind of 16 kilobyte boundary. Let's say the destination begins at a 16 kilobyte boundary, and your cache size is 16 kilobytes. In that case, of course, the two will conflict in the direct map cache because they will really try to go to the same set and actually the same entry if it's a direct map cache. So to solve something like that, usually there are just kind of easy tricks you can do, such as, for example, just changing the alignment of these arrays and so on. So if you're a programmer, basically you really want to know which kind of cache miss you have, because if you have a conflict miss problem, there are much easier solutions than changing your entire algorithm that you would need to do if you're having that you would have to do if you had a capacity problem. So when you start having multi-cores, then you have even more of a problem, basically, because you might know where that you have a lot of misses, but depending on whether they're conflict misses or capacity misses or now coherence misses, you will do different things. So if you have coherence misses, typically you solve those by essentially figuring out how to have your threads kind of communicate less. Basically, the coherence misses occur when the same data is used in a kind of read-write fashion by more than one thread in relatively close proximity in time. So basically, like I write something in one thread, and then I need another thread to read it, and then I override that in another thread, and then another thread reads it, and so on. So essentially, for avoiding coherence misses, you also have to change your algorithm, but the changes need to be essentially to kind of reduce the amount of communication between the threads. So for example, you try to make things a little bit more local, so that when somebody writes the data, the other threads basically end up reading it multiple times at least, or the same thread that does the update to the data is you change the program so that the thread that writes the data is the most likely one to actually need the data later, so that you don't have to communicate that data over the coherence fabric and so on. So depending on which kind of cache misses you have, essentially it really helps knowing which kind of misses you have in order to fix your code so that it doesn't suffer those misses on any given architecture. And my work over the past, let's say, 10 years has been on, for example, how would we design hardware mechanisms that are capable of classifying misses on the fly? Essentially what you're trying to do for project 2 and 3 in the simulator, except that it needs to be simple enough to be implemented in a real processor. So we cannot, in a real processor, to classify misses, model everything that is going on in a perfect cache, because really we cannot build a perfect cache in hardware, and we cannot have an infinite hash table and stuff like that you can do in the simulator. So how do you do it realistically? So that's essentially one aspect of what I'm doing. So my plan now is to for office hours where I don't get enough questions, just kind of include a segment about other aspects of my research work, because it's far more fun to me to tell you a little bit about my work than to kind of stare at the camera and await questions for 10 minutes. So thank you for attending the office hours. It's time now to end. Again, next week we will have office hours on Friday from 3:30 p.m. Atlanta time to 4:30 p.m. Atlanta time. I hope you will start studying for the midterm exam, so that we will have mostly questions about the midterm. If there are questions about Project 3, I'll have to kind of delay those in favor of midterm related questions, because the midterm kind of happens sooner than project 3. But of course, if you have questions that you do want to answer, basically questions that I don't manage to answer during the office hours, I'll try to just create like a Piazza post or something like that to kind of not leave you hanging for another week without an answer from me. So thank you for listening, especially to the 2 of you who actually stuck through the whole office hours, and thank you for taking the class.